The following is a conversation with a yogi, a teacher, a man who's spoken in depth on self-realization and personal fulfillment for over a decade. His name is Joey Lott, and it was my pleasure to converse with him. In this conversation, we discussed the magical journey that brought him to where he is today. We also discuss his gurus and what a guru is, as well as information he's mentioned he's never shared. If you'd like to see more of his content, I'll link his YouTube channel in the description. Now, enjoy this riveting episode of Cusp of Infinity. Excellent. All right, Joey Lott. It's nice to have you. First thing I'd like to ask is, in this current state in your life, where are you? Are you in a place of contentment, in a place of happiness, in a place of peace, in a place of, how would you describe it?
Oh, I would say that that's all of those things are true, but that would be, I'm sure that would be misleading to anybody who's listening to this, because certainly, at least from my experience, I was searching for those things for a very long time. I mean, very long is relative, but for most of my life, I was searching for those things. And the big joke, of course, is that they're always here, but we don't recognize them. And so that was certainly the case for me. So the peace and contentment and happiness that I've always wanted has always been here, meaning that it's not that they suddenly appeared and now I have those things and I didn't have them before. It's just that now I'm able to recognize them and appreciate them, whereas before I overlooked them.
So it's a realization more than something you've added to who you are.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's called self-realization.
I think that's an interesting point. I'd like to go into that a little bit more.
Mhm.
Often it's the case that seeking is an additive. It implies an additive function.
Mhm.
Um, and surely there are additive forms of pleasure. Would you disagree with that?
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. That's true.
Okay.
Those, in my experience, those tend to be problematic.
Okay, why do you say that?
Well, it's not that they're inherently problematic, but it's rather that if I think that something's going to make me happy, and then I get that, and then I feel happy. But then when that thing that I think I need in order to experience the happiness fades, which it inevitably will, then I make the mistake of thinking my happiness is faded, and then I seek out more of that thing so that I can again have the happiness that I want. So that's a pretty familiar cycle, I think, to most people.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and so um, so I would consider those things to be what you're calling additive pleasure, right? That's
Okay.
and um, and to a certain extent, those are unavoidable. We're going to continue to seek those things out. Even if we don't seek them out, they're going to come to us because
Mm-hmm.
we did seek them out, and so they will come to us. That's how karma works.
But
And so,
you're not saying the problem is them. The problem isn't that they're inexperienced. The problem is the ideal ideation or the pursuit of them as some escape, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that the majority of seeking is naturally in the direction of additive elements like this?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, by definition.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me with your teachings is it seems as if on the surface you say to attain additive things, or in my perspective, to attain that which we think would add on top of our
Mhm.
experience for the sake of, and correct me if I'm wrong, to see through them. And potentially it's not possible to without doing that. Or how would you phrase the way you've structured that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, um, so so what I share is only from my own experience. Okay, so so that's all I can share. And so my experience is that I, as you've suggested, and I've also suggested that I was seeking for those things because I thought those things were I thought those things were it. Okay, so I was relatively miserable, and so I was looking for a solution to that, and it seemed to me that the solution to that was what I called spirituality, and so I pursued that in a variety of ways for a long time. And um, initially, it was all about what you're calling this additive stuff. And I realized in that wasn't in and of itself, that was not going to do it. I had that much of a realization. And so then I started looking at it differently, thinking, that the answer was to escape from the seeking for all of that stuff.
Can I pause? Can I ask what triggered that insight for you? Was it the attainment of it and then the seeing that you were still in misery? Or was it
Mhm.
something else?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, certainly I did attain some things. Um, so I learned what now would be popularly referred to, I think, as just manifestation techniques. Okay, so I learned a lot of that stuff when I was like 20 years old, and I applied it. Like I do everything. I go all in. So I applied it very fervently, and I got some definite results in certain areas of my life. Financially, was I went from I remember having no money. I mean, I had moved out to Los Angeles I'm from the Midwest originally. I moved out to Los Angeles
Yes, me too.
when I was, yeah. Are you in Los Angeles now? No, no, you're
No,
in,
so I'm in the Midwest right now.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I moved to Los Angeles when I was 19, and I didn't have any prospects there, but I was working, I got a job. It was kind of a shady job, and paid almost nothing. And so I was living month to month at best. And then I started applying these teachings, and pretty soon I remember the day when I'd never had any money at all, and then I had $10,000, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Hmm.
That's amazing. And then I remember, I had $40,000, and then I had $100,000, and then I had $400,000. It was like,
Well, do you feel
so
this was a consequence of your application of manifestation techniques, or do you think it was
sure.
a result of effort in the right in the right areas, or some mix of the two?
Hmm. Well, I think,
Because surely there's, yeah, go ahead.
well, I definitely was, I guess you could say, working hard. But I was working hard before that.
Hmm.
So, what changed was my inner reality. I changed a lot of things inwardly, opening those doorways within to that abundance. So it had to manifest outwardly. Um, so I guess you could say there was some of that, some disillusionment in a sense, because I realized, well, okay, and now what? Because I've manifested this, but I'm still pretty unhappy. In fact, in a lot of ways, it amplified my unhappiness. But there's also another aspect to it, which I think was that I realized just how uh, ignorant I was. Once I started to open those doors, I realized that the magnitude of my misery and ignorance was far greater than I had ever imagined prior to that.
So when you say it increased your unhappiness, did it increase it, or did it simply take away the possible outlets you thought could help, and that sort of collapsed on itself? Or was it actually more like, did your misery, so the question is, did your misery really, did it increase, or was it just more clear that you were unable to escape in the ways you thought, so it led to this sort of maybe a nihilistic, maybe type of thing? Because I noticed that even in my own journey, the more and in perceiving others, there's a negative effect from getting things and not feeling better.
Well, I it's a good question you're asking. I would look at it a little differently, which is I think that what happened was my awareness increased. So I was maybe it's not that I became more miserable, but I became more aware of how
Aware of it.
miserable I was. And part of that might be what you're talking about too, which was that prior to that, I had unconscious illusions or delusion that I was going to be able to escape from that somehow in the future when I attain certain things, whatever those things might be. Enough power, success, money, adoration, whatever it might be. And so, yeah, maybe it's also true that there was some level of realization that I experienced that I'll never actually be able to solve the problem in that way.
Hmm.
But whatever the case, I I did turn. I remember I had a turning point. I was studying, so if you were in the Los Angeles area, you might be somewhat familiar with the Church of Religious Science. Have you ever heard of the Church of
Not
Religious
very
Science?
familiar, no.
Okay. Well, I was involved in the Church of Religious Science and I was studying to be a practitioner within that organization. And it's new thought stuff, which has to do with a lot of manifestation.
Okay.
Uh,
Is the priority a focus on the worship of a god, or is it to,
no, no, no,
is
no.
it like alchemical or occult type?
No, it's about understanding the nature of creation,
Okay.
understanding who you are in relationship to that. So the basic premise is that you as an individuated being are it's usually termed in the word God is used. So it says God is the infinite being, and all of this uh, is in the mind of God. Okay, so all things are in the mind of God, and you as an individuated being are a unique individuated expression of God, and therefore you have all of the capacities of the mind of God, so you can create in that same way. So that's the basic premise. So So I was studying for a couple of years in that organization, and then I remember having a turning point several years in which I got into transcendental meditation, and then I started reading books on non-duality. I got this book by this guy, Stephen Harrison, called Doing Nothing, which really had an impact on me.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. And then shortly after that, I met a teacher in the tradition of Papaji, who's was a, let's call him a disciple of Ramana Maharshi.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I appreciate his
And
work a lot.
yeah, so that was very pivotal for me, and that really fueled my pursuit of getting out of the whole matrix. I just because I started to see that it was all illusion, and that what I was really looking for was something completely transcendent of that. And so that became my main focus.
Could we zero in on what you mean by illusion? I often feel that's a misunderstood term.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I certainly misunderstood it.
Yeah. What do you mean by illusion? Because clearly
Well,
there's something occurring, but what is it that is illusory about it?
uh-huh. Well, at that time, I couldn't really have told you, so I can only answer you now. Um,
Sure.
my
If
my
you hold the
perception.
same view, then yeah. But if you don't, then we can
No,
move
I would say
forward.
I have very different views because then I viewed illusion as bad.
Okay.
I saw that it was all the illusion meant suffering, and so illusion was the enemy. It had to be overcome, but that was a lot of suffering to view things in that way,
I see.
which is why now I have a very different view, and that's why what I share now is not about trying to escape, but rather to integrate. Because my view now is that illusion, we could call it dream. Okay, so it's, or we could call it energy. It's consciousness vibrating.
And
It's conscious.
by
Go
this
ahead.
energy or dream or illusion, are you referring to anything specific? Is there a way to distinguish it as something? Like is it just appearance? Or is it a misunderstanding of appearance? Or is it what
Well,
is it?
yeah, I suppose that inherent in it is some misunderstanding. Because if there's no misunderstanding, then there wouldn't really be an appearance because the appearance is, um, in a sense, it's not even really happening.
Okay, what is that? What do you mean by that? As in
Mhm.
nothing is occurring.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, I don't usually talk about that too much because it's kind of pointless unless that's your actual experience. And it's
Okay.
not always my experience. It's sometimes
The
my
reason I
experience.
the reason I ask is I often find um in spirituality there's a labeling of dream onto the experience, and there can be this effect that nothing matters or nothing is real or
Mhm.
nothing is tangible, and um I feel that's often a misunderstanding, or it's not quite appropriate
Mhm.
it's almost like taking everything and minimizing it to something like it's all fake, and thus I don't have to worry about anything. But there might be actually something there that
Mhm.
is beckoning for attention. So I do want to clarify it because I think it can be
Mhm.
a scapegoat almost.
Sure.
towards taking responsibility.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And I um that's why I say that it only it's not even hardly worth talking about because it's only it's only valuable when it's actually directly perceived. And when it's directly perceived, there's no need to talk about it.
Mm,
And those problems that you're describing don't actually come into play in that case. They only come
correct.
into play when you're on the other side of it and you're having a misunderstanding of it.
Yes. Yes.
So,
That's more what I'm sort of concerned about, is that person on the other end will see that term and feel as
mhm,
if they can feel as if they understand it as a dream,
yeah,
and
yeah,
to simply think of it as a dream becomes the goal as opposed to direct
yeah,
perceiving of it. I've been
yeah,
there, and I felt that, and
yeah,
it's much different than direct perceiving.
correct.
So
Yeah.
I think that's enough clarification.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so after your experience with this Church of um, can you remind me the name?
Religious science. Yeah.
Religious science. Um, and you've and your interaction with Papaji's student,
Yeah.
um, that sort of shifted you away from what seems to be pursuing your solution to misery in the world. Um,
Yeah. Right. Which just led to more misery.
okay. How would you describe your what you were what you're moving towards, or what you found, or what it was that helped you uh, from this contact with this student of Papaji?
Well,
What was it?
I had an experience that was very transformative. So I had experiences prior to that, but I didn't understand them. Like I had had an experience when I was 19. I had a friend of mine had loaned me a cassette tape of these Qigong meditations by Ken Cohen. And I only listened to it once, but I had an experience that was very different. You know, it was the first sort of conscious, transcendent experience that I had where I had I realized that I was not who I had previously thought I was.
Would you say,
And
okay, is there would you fit it into any model like Satori, or would you say it was some type of, it was just an insight,
well, it was an experience.
an experience?
You know, it was just an experience. It was an experience that I I realized that I existed independent. Let's see, like we I think everybody has these experiences all the time because they're happening between every thought and between every breath, and they happen between states, like between the liminal states between waking and sleeping and things like that. But we usually don't notice them, or we don't recognize them or acknowledge them for what they are, and so we just immediately latch on to the new identity that appears without realizing that there was a gap in which there was no identification.
And the
But when
significance of that is what, that there is something exists, that you exist, but it's not in those thoughts, in those in what happened here between this thought and that thought. There's something there that you saw that changed how you perceive yourself.
Sure, because the I mean, eventually, when those kinds of experiences are repeated often enough and there's enough consciousness there, then what has to happen is that there's a realization that I am that which is continuous. I can't be those things which are coming and going. And so in those liminal states, there's a realization, if there's enough consciousness, that in that state, the identity of the person, the history, the narrative, the body, all those things is not there. And yet I'm there.
Hmm.
So I can't be all those other things because those things aren't here, but I'm here.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah.
interesting you say that this is a experience that's um, happening to everyone all the time,
Mhm.
because in most people's experience, this would be arguably quite a radical insight, right? So
Of course.
it depends on what you're saying, the level of consciousness of the person. And does that
Yeah.
consciousness have to be um could we talk, yeah, let's talk about that, like the levels of consciousness, because
Okay.
that seems like
Sure.
it's a interesting point you're making. What do
Yeah.
you mean by that level, a level of consciousness?
Well, you use the term.
Okay, what do you mean by it having enough consciousness to see it?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I don't know if I have the great answer. Um, all I can say is my experience. So I know that when I reflect back now, I can see that there were other kinds of experiences that I had in my life earlier in my life that were similar, but with less intensity or less awareness, less consciousness. And so I couldn't grasp them. It was like there was something there. It was a flash. There was something there, but and it left an impression, but I didn't really know what to do with it because there just wasn't enough of of a sense of recognizing that I'm that which is continuous. But then this event that happened when I was 19, I mean, I also easily forgot and dismissed that one, but not as easily. Um, and and I would say that kind of really set into motion a more intense seeking because I had because I couldn't dismiss it as easily. There was something about it where I realized there was something there. Something happened, and I couldn't explain it. It couldn't I couldn't fit that into my prior narrative of
Hmm.
myself. Um, so I don't know that I can say a whole lot more about it, except that then over time, I had other experiences. So I started practicing transcendental meditation, and then I would have more of those kinds of experiences, but I also couldn't hold them enough. So I would think that I was sleeping, for example. Um, so I used to joke with a friend of mine who was also practicing TM that my meditation was just my sitting up nap because as far as I could tell, I was just falling asleep. And I might have been falling asleep sometimes, but in retrospect, there were many times I was not falling asleep. But there was a falling away of what I thought that I was. And yet there was what remained was some presence, and I didn't, which clearly I am, but I didn't know how to understand that at that time. But then this experience that happened with this this teacher in this lineage of Papaji and Ramana guided me in this moment very directly and powerfully, showing me actually that I had the ability. It wasn't something that happened due to a technique. It wasn't something that happened from external causes. It was something that I actually could choose, which was just be present to this as it is right now. And it's like it's as if, and this is a metaphor, but it's as if prior to that I was in a car driving 60 miles an hour, and I thought that that was all there was to life. That was all I knew. And there was a lot of things about that that were uncomfortable, but I didn't know that I had any alternative. And then in this moment, when this person guided me, I realized that I could actually get out of the car, or that I'm never even in the car, but that there's still activity taking place, but I'm still. So I was mistaking that prior to that, I was mistaking that I was one with the activity, that all the activity, if there's movement, I am that movement. Like I'm in the car moving at 60 miles an hour. But in this realization, it's like, the, no, I'm the stillness and there is movement happening. But I can choose to recognize and acknowledge that stillness. And it doesn't make the movement stop. It just reveals that there's stillness always in while this other activity is taking place. So that was a very big shift.
And is this okay? And you liken it to a decision. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or you realized it was a decision or something like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was there a decider, or was it a decision being made by the driver, or was it something beyond that?
Well, these are probably good questions. I mean, at the time, I just assumed that that I was the decider, and um, and it seemed to be fairly repeatable. So that kind of confirmed my
As you said,
uh,
it was almost like the driver. So it doesn't sound like you're saying the driver decided to walk out of the car. It was as if something else saw that it was playing the role of the driver. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that
yeah,
something else saw that the option to not do that was
yeah.
there.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. And was that something that you had to continually decide, or was it something that you found was a decision that led to a constant a constant
Oh,
exit of that driver?
no, I definitely had to decide, and which was a big contributor to the ongoing misery because I mean everything ramped up at that point in my life. So I had been, I had a lot of anxiety, but I also had a lot of worldly success in certain ways. And following that, it was a big disaster, absolute disaster, because then everything was moving so fast, and I could not integrate into that.
I
It was
see.
just a big mess. It was really, really intense.
So the driver himself had an issue.
I guess I guess you could say that. I mean,
Did it feel like
I
pain? Was
I
it
felt
pain?
that I had a big issue. I felt
Okay.
like there was a big problem, very big problem.
So that's interesting. It sounds like you achieved a recognition that was helpful for you in reducing your misery, but somehow it destroyed your manifest reality. Is that all right? Is that the correct way to say it? Or it interfered? How would you describe it? Because it sounds like you found something that created peace or
It
something like that.
did, yeah, but that piece was I was only able to recognize that piece in the moments when I was outside of the movement. So I had to choose to get outside of the movement in order to know that piece. But I was not able to sustain that. I could sustain it for, a couple minutes. Maybe I could sustain it for up to an hour. Um, and I suppose in some ways these could be considered great accomplishments. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, these are in certain paths, like in a yogic path, these would be huge attainments. But the problem is in a yogic path, there have to be all kinds of other things put into place first, right? So I don't know how much you know about Patanjali's yoga. It's eight-limbed yoga.
I've read it, but I'm not an
Yeah.
expert.
Well, so I'm not an expert either, but it's 8 stages.
Yes.
So before
Eight
you get,
stages of sorry, 8 stages of awakening. I know there's
well,
eight
it's 8 stages.
factors for their like
Yeah, so it's progressive. You start out with I don't remember the exact order, but there's these they're basically like rules for how to live. Okay.
yeah, like the eightfold path, but yogic
Yeah,
version.
yeah, yamas and niyamas, and then you're supposed to and so it's like non-violence,
Yes.
not all those kinds of things. And then um and then you do the asanas, which are the poses, which are to prepare the body, and then you do pranayama, which is energy work,
Hmm.
usually breath work, but it's energy work, and then that's all to prepare you for the early stages of meditation, which is just to focus. And then you progress until you can get to the point of samadhi. That's the aim, is samadhi. And I don't know if what I'm describing would be considered samadhi or not. I'm not going to argue that, but the point I'm making here is that I had not really done all of the necessary preparation work. So my body was not prepared, my nervous system was not prepared, I was not prepared energetically to manage all of that. And so there I was having, I could have this experience, which is a great attainment, but without the proper context.
Mm.
And so, the yogis who are going to take that path seriously, they've got to do all that stuff so that they can be purified, and they've got to be in the right context, in the right place, with the right teachers, the right safeguards,
Mm.
so that their life doesn't turn into this big nightmare.
It's very, that's a very, I think an important point that one can have an insight that's almost too soon. I don't know if too soon would be the right word because it happens and,
Mhm.
you know, maybe for the best for the person, but yeah, too soon meaning it could create more destruction immediately without the preparation work. And
Yeah,
often this happens. I've noticed this can happen with people who take certain entheogens, or they see things, or they recognize that they're not who they are, and it just leads to
yeah.
this destructive path. Um, so if you were able to, um, in a way, rewind the clock, would that be something you would recommend to yourself, to slow down and to create a foundation?
Well, I don't know if so I'm not gonna answer that question because I don't
Okay,
know the answer to that. But what I
that's
can
fair.
say is that um, that is what I recommend to people now.
Okay, well, that answers the question for me.
Yeah.
So how did you manage navigate through that safely, or maybe not
Well,
safely, but what happened from that point forward? Sounds
um, well, it was a bit, like I say, it was a big disaster. I mean, I went from I was I mean, I just thought I would the simple common term to describe what I was experiencing would be anxiety. And so I was just thinking that everything was a problem, everything. And
and what was it that did you identify it? Were you able to identify the cause of it, or was it just this sense that um something was wrong, or did you know what it was that was creating the disturbance for you?
oh, I had no idea what it was. I mean, it's only in retrospect that I can kind of piece things together and see that it was very clearly um, I had I was pre I was primed for it already, right? Like there had been all the things in this the setup was there, but then there were certain triggers that occurred, like transcendental meditation was a big trigger, huge trigger. And then that experience
Trigger for what? Sorry.
for this anxiety,
Okay.
and then that experience where I realized I could get out of the driver's seat or whatever we want to call it was another big trigger, huge trigger. I didn't know that at the time. In fact, I if I'd known that, I probably would have handled it differently. But because I didn't recognize that, I was intentionally pushing it more and more and more. I was doing more of the very things that were exacerbating it.
Hmm.
And so it ended up then that I became totally non-functional. I mean, I had in 2000. 9, I was the co-owner of a business. We had, I think, 8 employees, and I couldn't couldn't do it anymore. I could not handle it at all. I had gone from being highly functional, albeit anxious, to not being able to hold it together at all. And I told my business partner that I needed to spend a winter in northern Wisconsin outdoors, which I did. And that was the end of the business. Um, like after that winter, I called him again and he's like, "Not the business is done now because I was I was essential for the business. The business couldn't function without me, but I couldn't function. So that was the end of the business.
Could I ask what it was that you were doing?
Web development.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I got very sick, very, very sick. And um, I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't do anything. I was just totally non-functional.
And your integration of that seems, I assume it seems as if you've integrated that experience and have come out the other end of it.
You could
Um,
say that. Yeah.
what is it that guided that? What helped you? What helped that? What helped you find stability again? Is there anything specific?
Yeah.
No? Just
Yeah.
time?
No, I wouldn't say time. It's difficult for me to exactly say um, what it is, eh, other than to say, um, so I'm going to say this, but then we're going to have probably going to have to unpack it because this is going to be it's probably a difficult thing to understand. So, because it's been difficult for me to understand. Uh, so I had in so in two well, okay, 2012, I was I think pretty legitimately concerned that I was not going to survive physically. And when I would go to sleep each night, or rather when I would go to bed, I was not sure that I was going to wake up again. And I don't think that was me being overly dramatic. I think I had very legitimate reasons to have that belief.
And this was
And
more than this was this strictly a physical sense that you're just very, very sick, or was it existential almost like you had
well, it was both.
okay,
Yeah. They obviously kind of go together. And
yeah, sure.
but I mean, I was not able to eat anything. It was just very, very difficult. And I had lost hope. I mean, all the things that I had previously been able to do to try to help myself, I could not do at all anymore. I couldn't meditate. I couldn't stand up hardly. I couldn't keep my attention on anything. It was just very bad. And then I was guided. Okay, so I don't know how many of these details really matter, but I lived in a little town in New Hampshire, little meaning I think 800 people, and and I was out in the woods. And this little town, like all towns in New England, has a library. But I don't know if you know anything about New Hampshire, but New Hampshire is not exactly the most culturally progressive place. It's sort of like a lot of hunting. Not that I'm against hunting necessarily, but the culture is
I get
not,
it. A little bit
it's
more
not,
conservative
yeah,
leaning, more
yeah,
old timey.
yeah, exactly. But I one day I went into the library, and in this little library in this little town in New Hampshire, they had A Course in Miracles. I'm like, I'm getting this. So I checked it out and I started reading it. And I don't know if you've ever read A Course in Miracles,
I
but
have.
it's weird. I mean, that's
I
my
usually
judgment.
have it on my bookshelf, but I
Okay.
moved it recently.
It's my judgment is it's weird in just in the sense of like difficult to understand.
Mhm.
And but I was compelled to continue to read it. And I'm married, by the way, and I was married at that time. And my wife, bless her, she I would read I was I'm a strange person. So I would just start reading it out loud, and she just thought it was weird. She was like, what is this? This is strange. So she didn't really want me to read it out loud anymore, so I stopped reading it out loud. But I had an experience where uh I felt that I had a visitation by Jesus. And that was a that was a pivotal moment, because I felt guided. I felt that
Well,
I felt that finally there was somebody here. In hindsight, I realized there's been somebody here all along. I just didn't. I I was blind to it.
in
I think
hindsight,
yeah,
in hindsight, someone had been there all along.
yeah.
Um, would you perceive it as something else now? Like, do you still feel that element of Jesus was what contacted you, or was it something more like your own self, your own inner guider,
Well, I
or some mix of those things?
think it's both.
Okay.
Um, and so, but that was pivotal because I think, and I wouldn't have been able to say this then because I didn't realize it in this way, but I felt that I had reached out, I had prayed and made contact, and I felt like that had been missing in my life. I really that made a huge difference for me, and so I started to feel empowered. I felt like, and this was small. I mean, I don't want to overstate it. It was small at the time, but so I don't know how it happened. I mean, it was just
Was it
guided from within. But
you
go
were
ahead.
just was it through it was so you were you it was through reading, or it was through your interaction with this work?
Yeah,
Um, do you recall what it was you were focusing on, or what was it, something that clicked specifically, or was it simply sort of in what felt like a random intervention? Maybe not random, but just sort of you didn't really.
I prayed and I felt the presence of Jesus.
What's that like? What was that like?
It's
How did you connect that with Jesus instead of something other than Jesus? Something.
Well, that's why you asked me, was it my own inner guide or was it Jesus? And that's why I say it's both. I mean, it was within, but it was also Jesus, and it was no mistaking it. I don't know how to explain it other than that. I mean, it's sort of like we're having a conversation, you're speaking to me. So it's you, I acknowledge that you're speaking to me. This is also happening within, so it's both. But how do I know that it's you speaking to me? Well, because obviously you're speaking to me. I can't mistake that. You have a distinct presence.
Hmm,
And so I know that it's you speaking to me. And in the
yes.
same way, if, if one is visited by a spiritual being, there's no confusion there. You know who it is.
Yeah. I guess I mean, like, I've introduced myself and let you know my name, and I appear as a visual
Yeah.
element Was it a visual? Was it like a
Mm,
sense, like a sense in your heart,
yeah.
or a visual experience,
It was
or just
not,
a knowing?
I'm not particularly visual. That's
Me
not my
neither.
strength. So I get a vague visual sense, and I had a vague visual sense, nothing very pronounced, but it's mostly just a feeling, like
But
you
it's something
feel.
you feel you knew it. Like that was a key. Like
Yeah,
it was like I know that you're in front of me, or I know I'm thinking a
right.
thought, or but
Yeah,
it wasn't a visual thing. It wasn't necessarily a thought, but it was like a somehow a direct awareness of some entity or some being, or
yeah,
Jesus, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so from following that, I was guided to healing practices that started to work very profoundly for me. EFT was the main one. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, what
It's
is EFT?
emotional freedom techniques. It's the tapping thing,
Okay.
this. And so I was doing that. It was the only thing that I could do. Like I said, I couldn't do anything else, but I could do that. And so through that, I realized that I just we call it karma. I had a lot of karma that was needed to be cleaned up. I mean, I was just suffering from that, and that was what needed to be done. It's not like I had overdone this transcendence business, but I hadn't cleaned up and integrated it at all. And so I had this big mess of karma that was just there, uh, that I was suffocating from. So I had to clean that up. And so EFT was the technique that I was working with that I had very good results with.
Would a correct way to interpret it be something like you opened up the floodgates of your karmic past, and it unfolded faster than you're able to process it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, especially the context that I work from now, um, that would definitely be how I would see it. Because if we fast forward, um, that continued. I felt the I'm saying all of this, and it's absolutely true, but I kind of roll my eyes a little bit because I know that I feel a little uncomfortable with it because I know that I have concern that some people are not open to this, and it might put them off. But here we are. I'm saying it anyway. So then I felt, following that, like a year later, I felt that I had, again, I felt, in this case, I felt the presence of Ramana. And another big transformation happened, big healing in my life. And it was after that that I started writing and sharing because it was just a huge healing that took place. And and I felt Ramana's presence with me, guiding me, and that continued. But again, in like 2017, 2018, um, again, it was like some things were rough in my life. Moved, um, we had moved to Vermont, and I was having some challenges, just like, I have a family now, and I was having challenges with paying bills. My family wants things, figuring out how to make all that work because I was really just kind of living in a place of I didn't care. I really didn't care that much.
Like a place of dispassion towards the world, just like
Yeah,
what can it offer you, or
yeah.
type. Yeah.
And so, but then but again, obviously had karma that needed to be cleaned up there because I started to feel the pain of that.
Interesting. And the pain was the catalyst for you to.
Always, the pain's always the catalyst for everything. Yeah. And so it was in 2000. I had a series of other experiences where I felt I was I had very distinct guidance. In this case, but I didn't know who this guidance was from. I didn't understand who this was from. I mean, of course, I knew it was all. I know there's only one, but I didn't understand the personalities involved in this guidance, and it was new to me. And and it, I was being. I had some experiences that were so um, unusual where things happened where I could not explain it in any other way. I mean, just very, very strange things. I'm not going to explain them here, but they were very, very strange to me, but clearly happened, where I was guided and the
Can I,
outcome were, yeah.
well, can I ask what it led you to? How did that change your view of things? Did it confirm something in you, these experiences? Like,
Well, I think what it did was it it was leading me to what was next, because I have a friend. He actually has moved away temporarily, but he was in this area, and he had been telling me that he had started doing this meditation, that he had received an initiation from this guy in India to do this meditation that was uh, worship of Divine Mother, and he was going on and on about it over a long period of time. I mean, long period of time over several months. He kept bringing it up.
is this the same as divine feminine, or is it just this the image of the mother of is it a specific woman, just or the general
Well, he
idea of
was he
this?
was doing the he was doing a practice worshiping Durga.
Okay, I don't know who that is, but representation of divine mother, right?
Yeah, she's a very fierce expression of Divine Mother, and she destroys all negativity. So um, he was telling me about this, and I would say that's interesting, but I have no personal interest in it. Because I would I would looked at it as I knew something far greater than that. So why am I going to be interested in worshiping Divine Mother? I mean, that just seems like a step down in my arrogant view at the time. But what I in retrospect, those experiences that I had opened me. These experiences of being guided and the pain and all this stuff opened me in ways that I wouldn't have understood prior to that. And I found myself taking an initiation into this meditation and starting to practice it. And so uh, now I have a clearer sense of things because what is happened is that my, and this is the part that's difficult for me to really explain because I've never really talked about it before. Um, but uh, it, my my guru made himself known to me in through that, and so
You're working with the divine mother in that,
through through that whole experience, well, because I
or
became initiated into that lineage.
somehow that, okay, somehow that lineage introduced you to your guru, or he introduced himself through.
Well, he is the lineage. So by receiving the initiation, I was introduced to that.
Okay. And that was in a similar vein. You just knew it. or was this someone who you met
It,
in real life, in this life?
w- um, you mean who is the guru?
No, I mean, in the same way you could understand, um, you could know Jesus or know Ramana. It was in a similar vein to this, or is it somehow different?
It's similar. Yeah, I would say it's similar. Similar but different in that. So it's similar uh, in that prior to that mating, I didn't have conscious knowledge of that person, of that being, right? So for like there was a time before which I didn't know about Ramana consciously. I had no knowledge of Ramana. I only learned about Ramana because I had this was in like 2003 or 2004. I had ended up at some meeting in the at the Bodhi Tree bookstore in West Hollywood, California, uh, given by this guy named Yudhishthira who had was a student of Papaji's, and I found Yudhishthira to be basically unintelligible. I couldn't make sense of what he was saying, and I really didn't connect with him at all. But he had a picture of Papaji, and I felt that Papaji was looking directly at me. I felt that Papaji was there. That was my experience of it. And I didn't know Papaji before that, but it had such an impression on me. Then I looked, I'm like, who is this Papaji guy? And I had to find out about him. And then it was only through that that I learned about Ramana. I didn't know anything about Ramana prior to that. And then it took me years to warm up to Ramana. To me, Papaji was it, and Ramana was like I didn't feel any real connection to him. I didn't understand Ramana at all. Um, but over time, I warmed up to Ramana. And so, and I guess you could say similar kind of thing for Jesus in the sense that, I suppose there was a time in my life when I didn't know anything about Jesus. And then, of course, growing up in the Midwest, I pretty early on came to learn a little bit about Jesus. I mean, at least saw his pictures everywhere, but really didn't feel a personal connection to Jesus. I was fairly I guess I had somewhat negative view of Jesus, in fact, because I had a fairly negative view of Christianity. I thought,
Fairly common in the West for those who've left the church,
yeah,
right?
I mean, I thought I thought, talk about delusion. I mean, I thought Christianity was complete delusion. Um, and I thought there's no historical Jesus, therefore there is no Jesus. That was my view of it. And but then I had an experience that changed that. And and so in a similar kind of way, I didn't know anything about this lineage that I was initiated into in 2019 prior to my friend telling me about the meditation that he was doing. And I didn't, so therefore I didn't know anything about the guru lineage and at all. I'd never heard of, I mean, the origin of the lineage is Shiva. I'd heard of Shiva, but other than that, I didn't know anything about it. And so it has taken time for me to warm up to that.
Is that a warming up process? Is that warming up process like, um, what is that? Is it sensing this is a goodness, or is it it's deepening a certain understanding, or how would you describe warming up? Is it, what does that entail for you?
Um, well, yeah, I think it's that there's still these kind of hardened shells of uh, call them egoic things of the sense of I'm going to do it. This is don't worry, I got it kind of thing. and then the pain of realizing I don't got it, or when I think I got it, it just hurts. Uh, and then to discover that there is something greater than those hardened shells that I had not seen so clearly, that is uh, working for my benefit.
Hmm.
It's sort of like
And
that's
the
why. Oh, go ahead.
and by benefit, it's something that you found created, um, I assume, more peace, more clarity around what it was that was these shells, like these things that um, are creating pain.
Mhm.
You saw them dissolve, or you saw them you're able to transcend them more easily than you were on your own.
Yeah, well, because there's no real way to do it on your own. That's the thing that, oh, I think I certainly did not understand, and I
Okay.
think many people do not understand. But
And
really, I don't. There is no way that you can do it on your own, because the one who's going to do it on his own or her own, um, I use this phrase now. It's like trying to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's never going to work.
I want to understand what you're saying correctly.
Mhm.
For somebody, you might say like Gautama or Ramana, who
Mhm.
did it on their own, or at least
Mhm.
that's my understanding. They didn't have formal teachers. Um,
Mhm.
is that what you mean? Or is what you mean that um, they also didn't do it on their own in some way, or are you drawing a line between an actual having a guru is absolutely necessary, a physical or non-physical guru is absolutely necessary? Is that what you're saying, or are you saying like I'm trying to get what you
Yeah,
mean?
it's absolutely necessary. Just to be clear, though, the the true guru is the self,
Okay.
but it has to manifest. Uh, it has to manifest in certain ways in order to be able to. You think about it like a chain. Okay, so the chain is formed of links. If you have some link at the bottom of the chain and it's not connected to the rest of the links, it's has no hope of ever having that connection. It has to actually be connected. And so in a sense, like we exist as a totality, as a chain made of links, and all those links have to be connected. That's true wholeness. And so long as there are links that are imagining that they're separate, then there's pain. And so the integration is the integration of all those links, which means that the link higher, in a sense, than the link that it needs to be integrated is the guru, is the manifestation of the guru.
I think I think I do understand. It's just I perceive certain teachers as having done it themselves, or having left teachers like
Mhm.
Gautama. He's left his teachers. He left his comrades or his
Yeah,
contemporaries. He
yeah.
pursued awakening individually and found it. It seems individually.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
how would you do you interpret that as having um, having someone help, or is it? I just want to
Well, in the
understand.
case of Ramana, he's very clear about it. I mean, Ramana says he identifies his guru as Arunachala.
His Yes, his is the Arunachala. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's he's acknowledging that there's a guru, and Arunachala is Shiva.
Mm.
But that's the same. So that Arunachala Shiva is ultimately revealed to be the the same self. So that's
I think I just am trying to discern if what you're saying is that anyone who's working on awakening independently,
yeah.
are you suggesting they stop everything they're doing, go to, whatever country and seek out a guru, or should they still work independently and do what everything they can? Like, is because I
The,
hear it almost as like, if that's the
the,
case, then you're wasting your time if you're doing it by yourself.
well, so okay, here's the thing about both Ramana and you call him Gautama, Siddhartha, whatever you want to call him. Okay.
The Buddha, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
they in both of their cases, there's a very common element to their story, which is that they remained, right? They did all of the things they did, and then they remained. So
What
their
do you mean?
stories are different, but well, so Siddhartha, he leaves the palace, he goes out into the forest, and he's starving himself, standing on one leg, and then realizes that's not going to do it, other than kill himself, right? That's the only outcome of that is he's going to die. So then he resolves, he goes and sits under the tree, and he resolves he's not going to move. So um, there's that. And then with Ramana, he was before he was Ramana, he was whatever his name was. I don't remember. But he was when he was 16 years old, he he left home. His father had died prior to that. He left home, got on a train, went to Arunachala, went to a temple, and sat there. That was, end of story. So are you, this is why I suggest to people you have to know yourself, because if you are that kind of person, then you will do that. But if you're not doing that, then you need to be honest about that, because that remaining is fixing yourself to one guru, right? So in the case of Ramana, he's fixing himself to Arunachala. He's not moving. He's fixed. And in the case of Siddhartha, he's fixed to the Bodhi tree. He won't move. So if so, are they doing it themselves? I would say no. I would say that they're lifted to that realization by virtue of being fixed. And so I do think that there's a real wisdom that can be taken from that, which is nobody ever does it on their own. They do it by fixing themselves to their guru. They do it by fixing themselves to that truth, which doesn't move. That's the point of the guru. I mean, so guru has many meanings, one of which is heavy, does not
Heavy?
move.
Heavy,
Heavy
okay.
doesn't move. Perfect stability, right? It does not move. So that's the point, is that it doesn't move. But what we're doing is we're moving all the time, right? And we have so many things that we can move to. We can say, well, I'll try a little bit of this kind of Buddhism, a little that type of Buddhism. I'll try this type of Christianity, that type of Christianity. I'll try a little bit of whatever. I'll try all these different things, and then I'll mix and match into my own thing. And that you're not fixed at all, except you're fixing yourself to the thing that's not fixed. You're fixing yourself to your own unintegrated ego, because that's the thing that's selecting, mixing and matching all the parts and pieces and saying, oh, this is the truth. But the real guru is that which is fixed, so that it remains and you have to come to it, rather than
Yeah,
insisting it will come to you.
from my understanding, it sounds like and correct me if I'm misinterpreted, the truth is there. It exists, and it exists as self, or it exists as the self. And
Yeah,
the actor or the seeker is always separate, or always separating him or herself from this. And
yeah,
the seeker is always going to find at the end that it is a fixed, personal. They can't themselves realize anything, but that realization is always something that has to, in a way, realize itself. Or it's like, it can be a physical guru, it could be the physical guru as the manifestation of truth, or it's just the truth, but it's something like a personal element. It's like a sentient personal thing or aspect that a person must ultimately absorb into. Is this a good way to say phrase what you're saying? Good
yeah,
way to understand it?
yeah. And then,
But it may not require the specific person or personality. So that's what I'm trying to clarify.
well, so
Or does it?
it's going, in a sense, yes. This is what I now understand that I didn't previously understand, is that, see, we often, or we're led to believe that we can select our guru, we get to select our path. But it turns out that's not true. Your path is predetermined. Your guru is predetermined. Your guru will select you because because you are for that path. And so when we're saying I'm going to do it on my own, we're postponing that. We say I'm going to select my path, I'm going to select my guru, I'm going to reject any gurus. Then we're actually just postponing our own liberation, our own integration. So it doesn't work. It's a unilateral thing, but it's from, we'll say, top down, not the other way around.
Why is it predetermined?
Well, because you are predetermined. I mean, you and I we are all predetermined in the sense that I'm not negating free will here. I'm not denying free will. I'm just saying that each of us we have our own makeup, right? Like we have this very specific set of karmas. Your set of karmas is different from my set of karmas.
Mhm.
So your set of karmas determines, in a sense, you. I mean, you are your karmas as an individual. You are your karmas. At a universal sense, you have no karmas. But at an individual sense, you are only your karmas.
Do you subscribe that I mean, you say we have free will. You say this.
Mhm.
Do
Mhm.
you subscribe to that we create karma as well? So, or is it just we must be in one track? Like, because I just want to clarify if it's a hopeless endeavor to try to change our karma, or if it's something that is an active, like, trajectory that we can kind of steer and turn according to our insensibilities, and maybe we decide this is not the karma I want anymore. I want to enter a new life trajectory, because
Sure.
I perceive that as um, it's something that would allow a person almost to choose where their realization ends.
There, I, I will agree with you that there is some of that, but again, it only unnecessarily postpones and complicates things because you're always,
To act, or to what post sorry, what postpones
well, so
the acting, or in acting?
let's say you're always within the sphere of a certain um let's think about it like using a mountain, climbing a mountain as a metaphor. Okay, so the top of the mountain is oneness, right? There's one top of the mountain, but from the base of the mountain, there are many paths that can be taken to the top.
Right.
Okay, so wherever you happen to be on that mountain, you are within you're uh, you're you're within the sphere of influence of a particular path. That's the closest path. It's the most expedient path. You could reject it. You could use your willpower to move away from that path and then move closer to a different path.
Okay.
And then you would be closer to that path, in which case you would be that would be the most
Okay.
expedient path.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying. So there's like a shortest path, essentially, is essentially what you're getting at. And
Yeah.
that's is that shortest path, this is the top of that, are you also saying the top of that mountain is distinct for each person, or is it always going to be, I guess, self?
Well,
And that's this,
obviously, at if we say that there's one, I mean, if the peak of the mountain is a single point, then there's no multiplicity there. So at that point, there's only one. There's no my experience of oneness and your experience of oneness because there's no you
so
and
it's
me
almost
there.
like
There's oneness.
if this is a big mountain, everyone is scattered in their own particular karmic way, and maybe there's more
Yeah.
dimensions in the mountain, but just for the
Yeah.
analogy, um you're suggesting that at that point we're not able to distinguish between each person that point, but the shortest path is going to be distinct for each person, and it will always be, um like you said, um that way. And if they try to move in this way, they can, but it will delay. So that's what,
Correct.
understanding what
Yeah,
you're saying. Okay, that makes sense.
exactly. Yes, which is why I'm saying, so in this lifetime, you have your karmas, which put you in the sphere of one path. And so that path will call the guru. And that path is beckoning you, right? It's like, come on, this is where you want to go. You know, you're wanting this. You've set this in motion. This is your desire. Come on. And if you and because you've done the work to get there, you've gotten yourself to that point. It's like, if whatever that is, you've done that work. I mean, if you just say like within this lifetime, you studied a certain thing. So you've done that. You've established certain uh, rituals that establish a kind, it helps you to be in that path. You could move away from that, but then you're kind of starting over.
Delaying something that's inevitable, or delay, maybe not. Let me rephrase, just delaying your ultimate fulfillment.
Yeah.
And is a person unable to do that by themselves? Is it really something that they need? I guess I think I do understand. I guess the problem um, I'm thinking about is, um what prevents a person from walking in that shortest path by themselves? Do they need to have their hand held? Is what I'm asking. Like, isn't the self already guiding
Yeah, of
itself?
course.
Like,
So the part of the problem here is that we're mixing levels.
I think,
So
yeah, we can
so
clarify some things, I think.
so at a higher level, then um there's no one who's giving a hand to lending a hand to anybody else. It's only self to self.
Only the self leading itself.
Yeah. But from the lower perspective, from the perspective of a relative sense of separation, right? If you're not experiencing oneness right now, if you're not perceiving oneness right now, and if that's not totally integrated, then there's a relative sense of separation. So then the perception necessarily has to be that there's a hand
Guiding.
being given to you to guide you. Yeah, exactly.
I understand. That makes sense.
And because I think this is so, because of that, at least for us Americans, is such a strong um, impulse or compulsion, really, to do it ourselves, to reject any kind of guru, right? Because we're so suspicious of it. Because I get it, because it's obviously that institution of guru has been betrayed and abused, and so we have lots of reasons to be uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
People are very much so led astray in the West.
yeah, and um, unfortunately, that can cause us to push away that which is actually for us, which is actually our own self lifting us. And so the a lot of the problem comes from there's so many paths, so many traditions, so many teachings, so many different practices. And if you're mixing and matching them, you don't have any guarantee that they're compatible or that they are expedient or anything like that. You could be mixing and matching some things that are actually in conflict with one another. So it's like one step forward, two steps back, and you don't
Mm.
know that. Versus when you hold to one path, one teaching, one lineage, again, being fixed, then that's simplified. You don't have to, it's such a relief not to feel that you have to figure it out and do it on your own.
Is there anything you'd recommend for a person who's concerned or like we said, there's a lot of exploitation of seekers. Um, there's a lot of psychopathy that sees the vulnerability in people and wants to guide or put themselves as their guru. Is there anything you
Mhm.
recommend to avoid that type of spiritual exploitation? Because in my world, it seems it's one of the most things I'm most concerned about is that happening to people, because it's
Mhm.
happening more now. I think as
I don't
spirituality
know.
is coming into the West. I
Yeah.
think
Well, I I,
it's
I
it was
used to
something I focused on, and so that's my bias.
I used
But
to be very focused on that as well. I had some uh I t- I had some very negative views of some uh teachers and gurus, specific ones, because from my perspective, they were exploitative and doing a lot of harm. And that was, when I started coaching people or working one-on-one with people, I was a lot of people would come to me who had had experiences with those teachers, and it was clear that it was just very harmful to them and that they had long-lasting repercussions. They were very confused. Um, and so I had a very strong opinion about that. But what I've come to realize is, and so for example, going hand in hand with that is now, at that same time when I had those concerns, I also felt like I needed to help people to see how confused they were, because sometimes people would come to me and they were really hurting, but they would hold so fast to their um, limiting beliefs that were what were hurting them, right? So they would say, I've got this big problem, and I want a solution to it. And I'd say, great, let's take a look at it. And then, so what are you doing? What are your beliefs? What's holding you to this? And they tell me, and I said, great, now that you see that, let's let it go, right? Like, seems pretty simple and straightforward. You're doing this to yourself. I get it. Other people are doing it to you, but they're doing it to you because you're signing up for it. You just keep going back. So when you can see through that, then you'll stop doing that. So you'll stop having them do that to you, and then your life can be different. Seems so clear. And I would try and try and try and try for sometimes for literally years with some people. And they would refuse to change or let go of anything. But I kept at it because I thought, this is my job. I've got to help them. I now have realized something very different, which is that I can't help those people because I can't help anybody. The only thing I can do is I can just point something out to somebody. And if they're ready and they're willing to do that work, then fantastic. And this is why presently I still respond to comments on YouTube, but now I'm getting so many comments. I don't know how much longer I can keep that up. But now I look and I see comments on, if there's somebody who says something very sincere and they have a question and they want to know, like, what's a practical thing that I could do here that might help me out? Do you have any suggestions? And I can say, take a look at this. But if somebody's just going to say, I'm suffering tremendously and it's everybody else's fault, which a lot of people do,
Mhm.
I now realize I can't help that person. They'll only be able to help themselves when they're ready to move beyond that. So this is a long-winded answer in which what I'm getting at is that I've come to realize now that, so one of the people I used to be, one of these gurus that I used to have a lot of irritation about and concern about, he's long dead now, but Rajneesh, because
Yes.
I
Sure.
mean, he's, I'm a lunatic. And and now I'm like, okay, look, if somebody's attracted to that, that's their business.
Mhm.
It's not my job to save them from that. I mean, certainly if somebody comes to me and they say, hey, what do you think? Should I follow the teachings of Rajneesh? I would say I wouldn't recommend it. But other than that, I don't, it's not my job to go out there and go on the street corners and shout out at the crowds, stay away from Rajneesh's teachings, because it's just not my job. It's not my business. And so people who are looking to be exploited, they'll find the exploiters. Unfortunately.
Okay. Okay. I think there's things that can be said that are helpful to to seekers who are ignorant. Like um just pointing out that um psychopaths exist, and not every teacher that proposes stands as a guide is going to serve you, and ultimately it is your own self that is the guide. This is at least if I'm talking to someone, this is how I feel. I feel obliged, not because I feel I can change them, but because I would want someone to tell me that, because I think people are so ready to follow anybody because
Yeah.
the world of psychopaths and exploitation isn't really understood here yet. Um, but I do agree that you can't help anyone that doesn't want that. But
I hear you, and I don't entirely disagree, but there's another nuance to this, which is that this is all what we are. It's all what we believe, and the more whatever attention we put to something gives it its reality. So if I put negative attention to something, I'm giving reality to it. If I'm going on about Rajneesh is the devil, I'm responsible actually for Rajneesh the devil. So if I'm affirming that there are spiritual teachers who are psychopaths, then I'm lending energy to that reality versus, and that's not what I want. So I now see that I have a different responsibility to myself, not to anybody else, but to myself, to give my energy to what I want. And what I want is a world of peace, harmony, respect, generosity, love, compassion, sincerity.
Mm. See, I don't know. I don't think it's negative. I see it as giving attention to what's true.
But what's true is uh, there's absolute truth and there's relative truth. Absolute truth is oneness. Relative truth is anything else. So if I'm affirming that there are psychopaths, then I'm going to see the psychopaths.
There's also saints too, true teachers. So it's not just there's just psychopaths. There's true teachers. It's just
Yeah, but well, sort of. It's difficult because the true teachers can also, for some people, Rajneesh is a true teacher. Seriously, not for many.
I come partly from reading Bill Hamilton's book Saints and Psychopaths.
I
And
don't know the book.
he was the teacher of Kenneth Folk and Daniel Ingram. But okay, yeah, he wrote a book on it, and I think it is important just to be not fearful, but I think it's like a truth that because I agree the attention we give is going to influence what returns to us. But as long as what it is that we're looking at is true, I guess it's not a problem as long as it's not like creating fear or negative emotions. But if it's true, like animals are slaughtered, and that's a truth, and it helped me make decisions about what I'm paying money for or how I'm
Mm,
investing in
mm,
into things, or
mm,
human trafficking exists, and certain things I can contribute to or not contribute to. So I
mm,
guess that's sort of my perspective on that.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm uh I see it just as I am so whatever it is that I am here to express that which is truth for me, right? That's my purpose, is to express what is truth for me. And I mean, I think that's everybody's purpose, is to
I would agree
express.
for myself
Yeah.
as well.
And so my I look at it just in terms of I'm only just looking at myself. I'm just interested in what's true for me. What is my truth? My truth. If my truth is, if my truth was uh, that human trafficking should be abolished, then that would be my truth, and I should express that. But what is presently clear to me, that is true for me, is that I have no interest in human trafficking. So I'm not going to try and abolish it because I don't want to, I don't, I, I see that it's possible to, like, why does human trafficking exist?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'm not, I mean, human ignorance and desire.
Well, but so do you think that, is it your belief that those who are engaged in human trafficking are uh, fulfilled human beings who know peace and love within themselves?
Oh, it's highly unlikely. It's not
Right.
impossible.
I I actually am, I haven't thought about it, but I would actually say it seems to me that it probably is impossible because there's
Yeah,
only
no,
one self. So nobody would, it's impossible to exploit another.
I don't know if I don't know if you heard it. I said it is highly unlikely, if not impossible.
Oh, if not impossible. I see. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So
So we're in agreement about that.
yeah.
Um, so then it seems to me that the 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 remedy there is not anything to do with human trafficking. The remedy there is the uh, affirmation and expression of the truth of peace, harmony, and oneness. That's just what seems clear to me. And
I agree with that.
yeah, and so then I look at, well,
But if there's anything I'm doing that might influence or make that expand as a feature in this world, I want to stop if I can. I want to know
yeah,
that. I want to.
but I what I look the way I look at it is, so I think what we've just defined is that human trafficking is really the polar opposite of, we'll just say, love for shorthand.
Sure. Yeah.
So because they exist as polar opposites, they have a relationship, and that relationship is that um, as long as I'm putting my attention, wherever I put my attention on, that's what's going to expand in my consciousness, in my experience, in my perception. So if I'm putting my attention on human trafficking in a negative sense, because I'm saying I want to get rid of it, I want to decrease it, what I'm actually doing is giving more energy to it. Versus if I put my attention on its polar opposite, we're calling it love here, I'm calling it love, then I'm expanding that, which means by definition, anything that is its opposite diminishes. I do understand that the view that I'm expressing is um, unpopular in many circles because it's people call it by bad names now. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what all those names mean, but I think some people call that spiritual bypassing.
I think the thing that I would say I need to be careful of is that what I'm focusing on is actually those things. And like I want to focus on love too. I want to focus on peace. I want to focus on things that I want to expand in my life. Um, but if somehow I'm, without knowing it, contributing, is that not something I would want to be aware of and focus on as
Well,
something?
sure. Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I can only speak about me.
So that's all I'm advocating for is awareness of what's true. I think is always good, but the truth of it might be disgusting, right?
Well, yeah, I guess the difference here might, and it might not be a difference. What I think I hear you saying, or what I thought I heard you saying, was that you were talking about an outer phenomenon of human trafficking. And the way I see it is that there is no such thing as an outer phenomenon at all. There's only the
See.
inner phenomenon. And so I can absolutely take responsibility for that within myself by acknowledging where I am
Yes.
presently lacking in seeing the clarity of love. And so I need to do that work within myself to clean that up because that's all that I'm experiencing and perceiving. That's all I'm
Yes.
saying. And that's why personally, and I'm not saying that anybody should do it any other way. I'm just saying for myself, I don't find any benefit in affirming the truth of human trafficking. I'm not denying that that might not be an objective perception that exists. And I'm not trying to, spiritually bypass or anything. What I'm trying to do is take responsibility. And I can't do anything about anybody else, but what I can definitely do is take responsibility for myself. And I can see that what is the metaphorically, what am I doing that's human trafficking with myself? And let me clean that up by applying love.
Okay.
Right.
I
So
mean,
if I'm devaluing other humans within my own consciousness, if I'm saying somebody out there is less than, then I need to clean that up in myself because that's the problem.
okay. I think I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Um, I see this in a lot of vegan circles actually. When they focus on industrialization of these things, it leads to a lot of negativity and pain and destruction in their own internal experience.
Hmm.
On the surface, it's it seems like it's a positive thing, but in reality, it can be highly destructive to the individual. So I think that's what I'm hearing, and I
That, I
see
mean,
as
that's,
well.
yeah, that's where I'm coming from because I went through a phase where I viewed all of uh, industrial civilization and indeed all civilization entirely as being the enemy. And that was very deeply destructive for me. So having come through that, that's why I have the view that I do now, that that was not only self-destructive, but also the end result of that way of thinking is, I mean, think about if you say, look, human trafficking exists as this thing out there, and there are people out there who are doing that, and they must be stopped because the human trafficking must be stopped. And then you say, well, it's continuing to happen, and the governments aren't doing enough to make it stop. So now the government is the enemy. And the corporations are also the enemy because they're not doing enough to make it stop. In fact, they're indirectly funding it.
Hmm,
You just keep going down that rabbit hole, and pretty soon you see that the entire system is your enemy. The entire system is the human trafficking.
hmm,
And so the only solution is you got to bring it down. You got to stop it. And how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to go become a terrorist. You're going to go start bombing stuff.
maybe.
Well, I mean, that's the logical conclusion of that
It
way of thinking.
cultivates hate, right? It cultivates a hatred.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
And and having gone down that path and seen that the effects within myself and then seen the effects on others who were going down that path, I saw nothing positive. There was no light at the end of that tunnel. It was total self-destruction, and then it was just going to, it's like bring down everybody with me. We'll just all
Hmm.
go down together, and we'll definitely end human trafficking because there'll be no more humans.
Hmm. Thank you, Joey. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I guess we have to end because it's getting dark here. Um, this was definitely uh, this is probably the strangest stuff that's come out of my mouth.
Well, I'm happy to facilitate that, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I very much appreciated this. you're a lovely human being, and I'm delighted to have had this opportunity.
Thank you. You too. Is there anything else that you'd like to finish with? Any last words or anything else you'd like to say?
To you personally, I would like to say again that I've truly found this to be delightful, and I'm very pleasantly surprised by your depth of insight. You clearly have a lot of of real experience. You've done a lot of work yourself. I can tell that. It's really a pleasure to meet somebody with your maturity and sincerity. So I feel like we're kindred spirits, brothers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trey. That means a lot.
Yeah.